Welcome to Mental Health Dumpster Fire, a podcast where therapists give their real opinions on mental health, relationships, parenting, and pop culture. Hosted by Courtney Laver, licensed clinical social worker, and Jess Miller, art therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and cannot be used as a substitute for therapy. We cannot provide mental health services via this podcast or social media. We occasionally use explicit language in our podcast and discuss serious mental health and relationship issues. Please use discretion if you are listening with children. We hope you enjoy the show. Don't forget to subscribe.
Hello and welcome to Mental Health Dumpster Fire. Hi. Bit of a rough time recently in the world, so we're going to keep it light today. How are you doing?
I'm stressed.
Yeah.
Everything's on fire.
Yeah. It's a dumpster fire, y'all.
Yeah.
It's a dumpster fire.
Yep. So just getting through the day as I can get through the day. How about you?
Yeah, same. I'm spending a lot less time on my phone.
That's good.
When I can. Because I got sucked down a hole of social media last week.
Yeah.
And it bummed me out real hard.
Yeah, I did too. I need to stop going on Facebook.
Yeah, that's really what it is.
Yep.
I need to take Facebook off my phone, I think.
I think that's what I need to do too.
Yeah.
I just need it to not be there.
Not be there. I'm going to try that for a while and see if that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't really use it for anything except networking for work.
Right.
And
I
for
do
family
like
stuff.
it for that, but maybe I just need to delete everybody and just have the networking stuff up there.
Just the people we work with or colleagues on there. Yeah, I don't know. Or just make a separate one that is only work related and
Maybe.
just don't use the personal Facebook.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I just have a lot of friends and family who are dispersed, don't live nearby.
Right.
And so that's one of the few ways I can keep up with what they're doing. But not very many people use Facebook at all. So it's
and even the people that you want to see on there, you don't see it because it's just ads and AI and
the algorithm is so fucked up.
Yeah, I'm not seeing people that I know very often. I'm just seeing news that I don't follow and
Yeah. And then random pages that I don't remember ever seeing in my life, but it says that I'm following them.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't get that I'm following them, but if you stare at something for 2 seconds, it's oh, you want to see that every day? Sure.
Yeah. It's you hovered your thumb over this image for a while, so you must want to see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no, I wanted to make sure that the bullshit I was seeing was bullshit. That wasn't just hallucinating. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I want to talk about art therapy because that's what I do. And so I'm also studying for my art therapy board exams so that I can be a nationally licensed art therapist. Yay. As part of being an art therapist, you have to take boards exams. I think there's 2, but I'm just taking 1 for the state of Kentucky. And then after that, I can make more money and do more independent therapeutic work.
Yeah.
Which will be nice.
Yeah.
But right now I'm studying and, I haven't studied since grad school. So I'm having to get back in the routine of how to study. And it sucks because I'm not good at it. I don't like doing it. It's not fun. So I thought I would just talk about what I'm studying on the podcast.
Okay. This is
help
a way
me
to study. Yeah.
The highest level of education or the highest level of learning is teaching.
Yep.
So I'm going to teach you all about art therapy. So what do you already know about art therapy?
Only what you've told me on the podcast.
Cool.
Yeah.
So everyone else already knows that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty standard, honestly. Most of the time when someone asks me, so what is art therapy? What do you do? I have to think about it really hard first. Because I'm well, how much do you already know? Or what do you assume art therapy is? Because I have to debunk 12 levels of stuff before we get to talking about what I do.
Yeah. I did want to ask, so you went to school for art therapy.
Yeah, for grad school.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting because play therapy you just go to school for therapy and then you do trainings for play therapy and become a registered play therapist through those trainings. But you had to get your degree in art therapy in order to be an art therapist.
Yes. And that is a national standard since, I want to say, the 60s and 70s.
Wow.
So an art therapist's like licensure is at the same like comparison of an LPCC or LMFT, CSW, all that kind of stuff. So you still have to go to grad school and get a master's in art therapy. So I got my master's degree from University of Louisville. Great program. One of the first programs for masters in art therapy. And the way it works is that my degree is technically a master's in education with a concentration in art therapy. Is what it is.
Okay, cool.
It's like long title thing on my what's the paper they give you when you
The diploma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. The long name on my diploma says Masters of Education in Human and Personnel Services, concentration in art therapy.
Okay. Because they can't make anything simple.
I don't know why it's that way. I don't really 100% care why it's that way. I just care that I got it. Right? But so I had to go to grad school to get that degree. And basically how the program was set up at U of L is that it's very similar to an LPCC program, but with art therapy focused classes. So I had a lot of like the more gen ed type classes for counseling. I had with a lot of the clinical counseling students too.
Okay.
So like my group counseling course, my multiculturalism course, the ethics course, the ethics course was art therapy actually. But a lot of the more general things that like all types of therapists need to know, it was from a clinical counseling focus.
Cool.
Which is what most of the art therapy research is based from, is from clinical research. So that's how they taught it. So there's something weird where I'm like a semester worth of classes away from being an LPCC. So if I wanted to, I could go back and get it. I'm not going to right now, but I could. But yeah, that's the program was basically clinical counseling through the perspective and lens of art therapy, and then clinical art therapy counseling classes where we were learning how to do like art therapy assessments, art therapy interventions, how to interpret a client's art, all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So every program's a little different. But I think that kind of clinical counseling is kind of the basis for most other art therapy programs, from what I understand. Because that's where the research started in, was more clinical side.
Cool.
So I want to talk about a little bit of the history of art therapy today. The American Art Therapy Association, which we call ADA, super cute. They have like a fact sheet of what is art therapy, and it's very general, but some of the stuff they have on there is pretty good. So basically, art therapy, mental health profession that enriches the lives of individuals, families, and communities through active art-making creative process, applied psychological theory, and human experience within a psychotherapeutic relationship. Pretty standard explanation. Kind of like, this is what art means. This is what therapy means.
Right.
Put them together, and that's art therapy.
Yeah.
Art therapy is a type of therapy that is very broad in who it can benefit. So it's not just for kids. That's always the first thing. Yes, I work with kids, but it's not just for kids. Doing art therapy with kids is a whole lot like play therapy. It's almost the same. Almost. But art therapy is also beneficial for adults and teenagers, the elderly, all the populations, all the ages. Requires a master's degree. So if you're looking for an art therapist in the United States, the letters to look for are ATR or ATR BC. So BC is board certified. That's when you take the test and you pass it. But those are the letters to look for. I don't know why it's ATR. Because it's art therapist registered instead of registered art therapist. I think they just didn't want us to be called rats.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that became like a joke when I was in grad school, and we called ourselves the rats. And so we have little like rat stickers that are painting like Picasso.
Cute.
Very cute. In the state of Kentucky, the additional letters you need to look for is, so that's ATRBC, but also LPAT or LPATA. And that's just a license for art therapists in the state of Kentucky, because not every state in the United States has a art therapy licensure board. So it's weird. But if someone has an ATR or ATRBC, they're a art therapist, like a registered art therapist. They've done the schoolwork.
So do you think that the states that don't have an art therapy board are those the states where it would be less likely that art therapy might be covered by insurance?
It's partly that, and it's partly the insurance thing, but also just the acceptance that art therapy is a valid therapeutic.
Which is so strange because it's evidence-based.
Right.
Like,
it's been around for a very long time, right? But it's still, art therapy very often gets lumped into recreational therapy. And not that recreational therapy isn't effective, but recreational therapy is not a board certified, accredited, blah, blah, blah. Like I think you just need a bachelor's degree to do most recreational therapies.
yeah.
And then like this music therapy also gets lumped into recreational therapy too. But it's not. Music therapy and art therapy are not recreational. Music and art are seen as recreational, they're seen as hobbies. And I think that's why there's like that stigma that art therapy isn't like real therapy.
Right.
So there's that going on. And there's also demographically, the states that have offer a master's program in art therapy have a state licensure for art therapy. The states that don't have an art therapy master's program don't have the license.
Makes sense.
So yeah, just makes sense. It's kind of weird and confusing, and like, we live near Indiana, so if I wanted to practice in Indiana, I think I'd have to have an LPCC or something, because they don't recognize the art therapy.
Yeah, the state,
license.
It's so weird to live near a border of a state and to not have any kind of reciprocity. Like, I can't. If I wanted to be licensed in Kentucky and Indiana, I think I'd have to take another licensing test in Indiana. And I have to pay for both of those licenses. I have to do whatever trainings. I have to pay for both of the reinstatements and make sure that I'm getting Kentucky board certified trainings and Indiana license trainings.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like a lot more work.
Yeah, I looked into it because I was like, I'm in the process of getting my full art therapy national board certified license. So I was like, what? I should look into doing Indiana too, because I've got clients in Indiana.
Yeah.
And it would just make it easy. And I looked into what I would need to do, and it was so much stuff, like you're saying. And I was like, I'm not going to keep up with that, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stick with my Kentucky requirements.
Yeah, it's so hard. I hate it, though, because there's like 10 minutes to get to Indiana. And if I have clients who live in Indiana, they have to drive over here, which I prefer in person anyway. But like, if there's ever an emergency and like somebody's car breaks down, I could see them via telehealth if they live in Kentucky.
Yeah.
But if they live in Indiana, I can't see them if they're at home.
I hate it so much. And I guess I kind of understand the rules, but it's also so weird because I could be a licensed art therapist in California. Yeah. But I'm not physically in California. But I can still see clients via telehealth who are there. So it's like, so I don't understand why. Like, it should be more of like a regional license, where it's like, you live in Louisville, therefore your license applies to Southern Indiana, Southern Ohio, Northern Tennessee, a little bit of West Virginia, a little bit of Virginia. Let's do a radius.
Yeah, I don't understand. Because like, it's also like I got stuck during COVID. I went home to Arizona for a little bit and my flights got canceled. But I was still able to do my job telehealth, even though I was in a different state.
But it's
because
where
my
your
clients
client
were
is.
in Kentucky.
I was so confused.
Yeah.
I mean, I was glad that I got to do my job and get paid, but
Right.
like, it was crazy.
It's almost like it's set up so that we as the therapist are more available, like, for the clients.
And yet we're not.
But also we're not.
Yeah.
Because we're
If you
also
live
restricted at the
in the
same
middle
time.
of a state, or you live in like a really
Right.
big state.
If you
then
live in
sure.
the middle of freaking Colorado or something like that, where it's just a big rectangle state, then it makes sense. But we live in Kentucky, which is not a very big state.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by a bunch of other states that are like small.
And we are on the border of that
And we're
small
right
state. Yeah.
The Kentuckyana area, right? So
yeah, if I live in the Kentuckyana area, I should be able to see
Right.
Kentuckyana people.
Like this region is called Kentuckyana or the Ohio River Valley, but we're on the more Indiana than Ohio like side.
Right.
So like east to west wise. So
Whatever.
anyway,
Sorry, that's off topic.
we have a lot of complaints. But anyone who's interested in becoming a therapist or an art therapist might want to consider that. Like where they live is going to determine what type of license they need to get. Like I think because we were looking into moving to Michigan maybe, and
I would love to live in Michigan.
I love Michigan. I would get paid way more.
Yeah.
But they don't have they're in the process of having a state license for art therapists. They currently don't have one though. So if I were to move there and then they would get the license, I would have to do everything all over again.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'll just wait.
Maybe wait. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just wait and just see Kentucky clients. It's fine. The history of art therapy. On top of having a master's in art therapy, have a bachelor's degree in education and art history because I got to put them together at a liberal arts school.
Woohoo!
I thought I was going to work in a museum. And then
I
did for a little while. And I was like, this is the loneliest job ever.
Yeah.
I worked in a museum. There were no kids at this museum. And I worked in the basement trying to figure out how to get kids to come to the museum.
Oh.
I got to look at really cool historical artifacts, up close and personal. Very cool stuff. And that was like enough of a distraction that I made it for a little while. And then I was like, no one wants to come here. No one wants to hear me talk about this stuff. So I'm going to talk to you about the history of art therapy instead. So art therapy, like the term art therapy, is credited to be first coined in the 1940s by a British artist named Adrian Hill. Adrian Hill served World War I, and his job was to go to the front lines and draw pictures of the scenes that he was seeing as like a historical record. And then also to draw out like, not battle maps, but kind of like where he could see where like enemy lines were, what it looked like the trenches looked like because they were awful. So he was kind of just documenting what was going on. And then because they didn't have cameras, the pictures would be sent back to higher ups. They would help determine like what they were going to do next, blah, blah, blah. So he was using his artistic talent in the war effort for the British Army. He got sick with tuberculosis, awful, in 1938 after the war. And so everyone kind of knows the infamy of tuberculosis patients where they're like kind of can't move. They've got a lot of fatigue. People were sent to sanatoriums to pretty much kind of ride it out and die or ride it out and get better. So he found that incredibly depressing.
Yeah.
And when he was at the tuberculosis sanatorium that he was sent to, he started painting to kind of kill time because there was really nothing to do except lay in bed. And we know nowadays that if people are chronically ill or terminally ill, laying in bed about it, like bed rest is part of the treatment, but laying in bed and doing nothing deteriorates mental health, which also deteriorates your physical health, right? So he was getting up and painting constantly all day long. And more people were, like, other patients started to get interested in what he was doing. And when he was discharged from the sanatorium, he was no longer sick, or like he wasn't so sick he had to stay there anymore. So he started teaching art lessons to the patients that were at these hospitals. He also started teaching at other hospitals where there were war veterans. He was working at like a children's hospital at one point with civilians. And so he started to see the therapeutic benefit of art making for those people in hospitals. And that's where he first coined art therapy. He was the first president and the founder of the British Association of Art Therapists in 1968. He was kind of anti-psychoanalytic.
Okay.
Which,
interesting.
In that time, in the like 50s and 60s, that was the thing. That was like a rising, very much had been a rising like trend in psychology for a while.
I feel like one of the assumptions about art therapy is that it's kind of psychoanalytic, like that you're going to be making art and it's going to be looked at by the therapist and like interpreted.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I vividly remember like one of my first days of grad school with all these other people. And I started grad school when I was 29, when I was 30. And so everyone else there was like 22. Mm-hmm. And then there were a couple of people who were a little older than me, but most people were fresh out of undergrad. And I had taken some like child development and relative psychology classes when I was an undergrad for my education degree. So I had like, I had kind of like gotten into psychology a little bit, and I had also worked in a school for a while. So I was seeing a lot more real life stuff. And I remember like reading up a whole lot about art therapy before I even went to grad school. So I was like, I want to be really prepared because I was afraid I was going to be behind all of these younger people. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be able to catch up. And we were all blown away because we all went into grad school thinking it was going to be psychoanalytic, right? People are going to draw a picture and I can diagnose them based off of the picture they draw, which is a huge myth of art therapy. So in one of our classes, our professor like put up different drawings, up on the screen. And she just kind of asked us what our thoughts were on the different pictures. And all of us were kind of like, oh, I think that person might be depressed because they use the color blue. And like, I think based on that drawing, that person has anger issues based on the way they drew the person. Mm-hmm. And, we have no idea what we're talking about.
Right.
We're coming from a background of taking art in undergrad and psychology in undergrad. We have no idea what we're talking about. And after every picture, after every drawing, our professor was like, she was like, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. It was this. Like there was I remember one picture being put up. This might have been my second semester where we were doing more work into assessments. There are some art therapy assessments, but they're not really about diagnosing people.
Right.
But she put up a drawing of a house. That's a very common assessment in art therapy. Draw a house. So it was a house that had heart-shaped windows and like the sun in the sky, and it was very like cutesy drawing of a house. And so we were all like, this is a good drawing. This is a person who is like, they're very positive. They're in a good place right now. And, they have like a sturdy whatever. They're doing good. And she was like, this person actually is not okay. And she went through and told us about like there's these like key elements of drawing a house that the person missed. There was no door.
Ooh.
There was no chimney. And this drawing was done like, I think she said in the 80s. So houses with chimneys are a lot more common than they are now. But she was telling us like they missed these key elements of drawing a house that like a 5-year-old would do. But this woman was in her 40s and she was admitted to an inpatient facility for having some auditory hallucinations that were making her, they thought she might be schizophrenic maybe.
Got it.
But she was having auditory hallucinations and she was telling us how we could see those connections in the house. So it's like part of art therapy is psychoanalytic. We can do some things, but a lot of the stuff that people assume, like the ink blot stuff, it's just kind of garbage. Like it's subjective to the
Right. Well,
person.
and it's hard to like look at just one piece of art, have never seen that person or met that person. Like you're just looking at a piece of art that somebody made,
right.
and trying to like, it's like looking at somebody on TikTok and being like, "Oh, you have bipolar disorder."
Yeah,
like, no,
yeah.
you don't know that. Like,
Right. Like you can't look at one piece of a person and just make these grand assumptions about that person. And so in art therapy in grad school, that's what we learned was that, you know, just based off of one drawing someone does, we can't assume anything about that person. We need the context of who they are and like their age and their gender identity and like where they grew up, what culture are they part of? What were the diagnoses that followed them through life? What are their current diagnoses? Do they have any at all? Are they married? Are they not? Like all of that stuff has to be taken in with the drawing.
yeah.
Because you can't just separate them.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people think that I can look at how you draw and then tell you what's wrong with you.
Right. Yeah.
Like people don't like to draw in front of me when they learn I'm an art therapist because they think I'm going to like judge them or psychoanalyze them while they're drawing.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of times, at least for me, I would feel like a lot of times the first drawing or first something that somebody does in art therapy is going to have some anxiety behind it just because you feel like, oh, you're going to look at this and I'm not an artist.
Right,
and blah, blah,
right.
blah.
Oh, yeah. Every single person is like, I'm not good at drawing or I'm not an artist. I'm not creative, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can still do art therapy even though you don't know how to draw. It's fine. But it's just interesting that the like British Association of Art Therapy and like when they first got started, they were kind of anti psychoanalytic stuff.
Yeah.
So they're still, I know like Ireland has their own art therapy association because I wanted to go there. But I know they are very like what some people would call woo-woo about their art therapy. They're much more about the experience of art therapy, the process. They get a lot into like somatics, things like that. And they're less kind of clinical-y feeling.
Okay.
Is how art therapy, from what I could tell in my research, is how they do it. And I think Canada's art therapy programs, because I think they have a couple, they're kind of similar, where they're a little more like woo-woo is the best thing I could think of.
It's kind of like the process of making the art is the therapeutic part rather than
less focused on like what are they drawing, how are they drawing it, what does it mean, like less about looking into those types of things and more about how is the client experiencing the art making progress and how is that helpful for them.
Yeah.
Which is what I subscribe to as well. The American art therapy trend started up in the same time as the British one, and we credit Margaret Naumburg and Edith Kramer as like the mothers of art therapy. And they were both in New York. So the birthplace of art therapy in America was in New York. So Margaret was a psychologist and an educator. She first started out her like professional career as an educator. So she was very into finding alternative types of education models. She really got into like the Montessori school. She went and visited the Montessori program that originated in Italy and got to see it firsthand and learn all about it. She brought it back to New York with her. And she opened the Walden School in New York City, which is kind of like an infamous progressive education school. She opened it in 1914. I don't think the school is still there. It got absorbed into another school, and then I think they had to close in like maybe the 90s.
Okay.
Something like that. But for a non-public school, that is a very long time. Her second career started in the 30s. She started gaining an interest in psychoanalytic theory. She had a degree in psychology and economics when she went to college. So she got really into psychoanalysis, and she wanted, for the school that she started, she was really wanting progressive education, but also like spiritual inquiry and like conversation and a focus on creative expression. So she came up with the term dynamically oriented art therapy, which is kind of like the idea that art therapy, or that therapy, in therapy, art is kind of a projection of unconscious thought.
Okay.
So, sure. It can be. So she really encouraged her clients and students to do like free association art. No prompting, no directive, just here's paper and materials, make something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I really like that.
Yeah.
I do that with my clients. But she got really into like, what does it mean kind of stuff. And she at first started out kind of like from her perspective, like, what do I think it means, this art that they're making? And then the more and more she worked with people, the more and more she took in their context and asked them first, what does their art mean? So she started out very psychoanalytic and started getting more into the woo-woo side. I don't know how else to call it. There's a word for it, but I can't remember.
It's just more like free.
Yeah. Just more client-centered, honestly.
Yeah.
Just a lot more client-centered. Less directive.
So less directive.
More expressive, I guess.
Yeah.
More expressive than psychoanalytic.
Yeah. I want to say like less clinical, but it's not really less clinical. It's just different.
Yeah, it's just different.
Yeah.
It's just less, it seems less clinically because we're not psychoanalyzing, which is what people assume clinical counseling and clinical therapy is like. So she kept working on her approach to art therapy, and she drew from Sigmund Freud, of course, but also from Carl Jung, which is interesting because I find that interesting because Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung like kind of started out together, and Carl Jung kind of followed Freud, and then they had the schism, they had the falling out, and Carl Jung kind of like went off and did his own thing, and it was very different from what Freud was kind of preaching, but Carl Jung's work is typically what a lot of therapists still use today.
Yeah.
It just kind of originated from psychoanalytic, but Carl Jung just was like, he leaned into more expressive.
Yeah.
More symbolism and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Margaret had a specific interest in reoccurring symbols in people's artwork, and she believed that the only valid interpretation of symbols came from the artist themselves, which is not how Freud saw symbolism, and is more Jungian.
Yeah. Freud, like I'm thinking of like dream analysis. Like Freud was very much like, if there's a shark in your dream, it means this. If you are falling in your dream, it means this. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't take into account anybody's personal experience. Like, what if you love sharks?
Yeah,
like,
maybe it's your favorite animal, or maybe you live in an area like where sharks are commonly seen all the time. So it's just like you see sharks a lot.
Yeah.
So they pop up in your dream. So she got more and more into clients interpret their own artwork as art therapy, which is what we do.
Yeah.
The clients give the interpretation. We just help facilitate the conversation around it. She was quoted for saying, when art teachings are routine, it discourages effort at spontaneous and creative expression, which forces pupils to recreate what they already know is good. That's kind of like the crux of art is therapy. And it's not me teaching you how to do art.
Mm-hmm.
It's not me teaching you how to draw this thing you want to draw. It's you draw whatever comes to your mind, however you want to draw it, and then we talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I know I've heard people who work in like inpatient settings with art therapy where they do groups and they keep calling it the art class group or whatever. And they're like, I'm not teaching them how to make art. I'm teaching them how to use the materials appropriately.
Sure.
Or like if we are making something specific, I'm giving them directions like how to make a box out of paper or fold an origami star. But the art they make is their own. It's their own interpretation. Margaret kind of got famous within the art therapy community for having people just scribble. So we did this in our very first day of grad school too. She had huge pieces of paper laid out and she would have different drawing materials, paint, chalk, pastel, and markers. And she told people to just scribble all over the paper until they felt like it was full of scribbles. Then they're asked to look at their scribbles and pick out images that they see from their scribbles. So like kind of like looking at a cloud and seeing a person's face. You're looking at the scribbles and picking out imagery from there. So then they take the images that they find from the scribbles and draw them on a separate piece of paper and come up with a story about how those images are related to each other. Like, what is the story here between your fish, man's face, a flower vase, and a puppy? Like, come up with a story. What's the relationship between these things? And then they make up a story with the images, they color it in, and then if they're in a group, they typically will share what they came up with. She would also do this and ask people to close their eyes for the scribbling part so that they're less focused on how the scribble looks on paper and more about the movement of scribbling. And then she would also encourage people to do it with their non-dominant hand, scribble with non-dominant hand, less control, more free-flowing. She was very much trying to get people to let go of control.
Yeah.
And then, depending on like the age range, I would assume, she would also have people look at what are the images they keep seeing in their scribble and what might those things mean to the person. So like if you keep seeing hearts everywhere in your scribbles, like what does that symbol mean to you? Why do you keep seeing it everywhere? It taps into that unconscious part of the brain of like, you keep seeing the symbol everywhere. What's that mean? The scribble drawing was something that Margaret did with pretty much everyone she worked with, but it was actually developed by her sister, who was an art teacher at the school that she opened, the Walden School. Margaret worked at the New York State Psychiatric Institute. She published a huge amount of case studies from working there, where she used art for diagnosing, art for therapy. She taught art therapy undergrad courses at NYU and then lobbied for the graduate level art therapy program later. So Edith Kramer is the other mother of art therapy. I love her. She was an Austrian painter. She fled Austria to New York with the World War I issues, World War II. She worked in New York City as an art teacher. And then during World War II, she was a machinist. So Rosie the Riveter type gal. So she worked as an art teacher for a long time. She had an opportunity to go visit the Lascaux cave paintings in France, which are the oldest known cave paintings at the time. She was just very moved and inspired by the cave paintings, and she kind of became like hyper fixated on this idea that as art as a universal language, because a lot of the drawings of those really, really old cave paintings we see in like modern art too. Edith was raised in a family in Austria when she was in Austria that was very much like educate your kids, blah, blah, blah. Like they very much wanted their kids to be well-rounded in all types of education. Whatever they were into, they found a tutor for. But her parents and older siblings were really into Sigmund Freud, into psychoanalytic stuff. While she didn't have like professional training at the time in psychology, she had a huge interest in it and was kind of like raised in that environment, I guess. So Edith and Margaret worked very close together in developing art therapy in America, and then eventually they parted ways. Another schism. And it's because Edith believed she had a belief in art as the therapy, while Margaret was more about incorporating art into therapy.
Okay.
So it's kind of like two different camps of art therapy process versus art in therapy. Edith dedicated her life to working with children and teens. She also taught at NYU, wrote a bunch of books. Yeah, and she taught in the graduate program too. And she very much was, for the rest of her professional life, believed in the process of art making and the art product were both just as important within art therapy. Dr. Lucille Venture, she was the first African American to become certified in art therapy and the first person to get a PhD in art therapy. She did she's the one who brought in multiculturalism into art therapy world because pretty much up until that point, it was just for white people. Like, yes, they were going into psychiatric facilities, but it was in the richer, whiter neighborhoods. So Lucille was like, hey, poor people need art therapy too. Black people need art therapy too. And Lucille also believed that the art therapy career was very elitist at the time. And she pushed really, really hard to give access to young art therapists who might not have been able to get a career by providing grants and scholarships. And she very much was like Edith Kramer in the idea of the process of art is what's therapeutic. And then just want to mention Dr. Myra Levick because she was huge in the U of L art therapy Louisville area community. She was the first president of the American Art Therapy Association. She studied art and art history. And then she randomly chose to answer an ad for a job at a psychiatric unit. And she worked with the psychiatrist on the unit, Dr. Goldman, and they explored using art therapy with the patients there. They had ideas of focusing more on the expression part of art therapy with patients. Not only visual art, but music and dance, other types of expression. They started the undergraduate art therapy program in Maryland, but Myra's credited as pioneering the new field in a profession that was dominated by men. So she was one of the first women to really rise up the ranks of teacher, professional, doing the research. She did a huge amount of research, professional research into art therapy. She carried on the graduate school program on her own for a very long time, and she developed one of the first art therapy assessments that we still use today. And I wanted to talk about her because she passed away my first semester of grad school. And so we had our professors were her students.
Oh, wow.
So we talked about her a lot that semester. Very cool lady. I didn't get the chance to meet her, but she sounded like a hoot. Absolute hoot. And then one of the people who I think doesn't get enough credit for contributing to art therapy is Frida Kahlo.
Yeah, you've mentioned her before.
Yeah. So she was not an art therapist. She's an artist. Everyone's heard of her, from Mexico. I would consider her to be a classic, wonderful case study on the benefits of art on a person's mental health. She went through a lot. When she was 6 years old, she had polio. When she was 18, she was in a bus that flipped, and she suffered innumerable health problems because of that, physical problems. She broke part of her spine, in the middle of her back. She broke her collarbone. I think she had something going on with her leg where there were 11 to 12 fractures throughout one of her legs got crushed. And she was only 18. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, for the rest of her life, she had chronic pain, chronic fatigue. She had to wear all these different back brace corset contraptions that were not easily accessible at the time where she was living. Mm-hmm. So they would have to just make things for her that would fit her. So she had to wear a waist to shoulder plaster cast. She had to wear this thing that looked like a cage almost of steel. Ugh. Basically really hardcore corsetry.
So she could not move her spine.
So she couldn't move her spine.
Yeah.
And it took very, very long to heal, and it caused all kinds of other problems in her body too. And she had polio as a kid. So she already had an immunocompromised system, and her bones were not doing great to begin with.
Right.
Because of having polio. So she was hospitalized several times, but every time she was hospitalized, it was for a very long time. Months and months. So she had to go through more than 30 different surgeries in her lifetime. She ended up getting some medical treatment when she was in San Francisco that was helpful, but she still suffered from chronic pain, fatigue, and not able to move very well at all. So she had to sit a lot. She had to lay in bed perfectly on her back a lot. She couldn't sit up at one point, or at several points. So she was just not able to do a lot. And with Adrian Hill, where he realized that sitting around in a hospital is not a great way to just heal because you're just sitting there thinking about how sick you are. Mm-hmm. Her mental health was hugely impacted. She had depression, anxiety, all that stuff. Really bad. So she is a self-taught painter, which
Cool.
is impressive, first of all. She taught herself to paint while she was laid up in hospital beds from the age of 18 for the rest of her life. She used her art to express her suffering, physical suffering, but also to process her grief because, she was up until the age of 18, she was, expecting to lead a typical normal life, got into this horrible bus crash and was in a hospital bed for most of her life. And that will mess up whatever plans you had.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to have a family and she wasn't able to for a while. She had, I think, 3 kids, but she lost them all young. So she processed that grief through her artwork and she expressed her emotions through her artwork. And not only did it help her, but other people were seeing her artwork and they could feel the emotion and expression through her own artwork.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive that she was able to do that. But she had a lot to put into her art. Most of her art that people know of are her self-portraits. Those are kind of the most poignant things that she's done. And she made a lot of self-portraits. She used a lot of symbolism. She really leaned into her Mexican heritage, a lot of folklore and superstition from where she was raised. She was painting during the surrealism art movement. So she really liked surrealism and she felt that it was a good representation for how she was feeling because she kind of described her pain and not being able to move around would give her kind of out of body experiences sometimes where she was just kind of dissociating basically.
Yeah.
And so that came through in her surrealist paintings.
Can you describe surrealism?
Surrealism. So Salvador Dali is
Okay.
a classic surrealist painter. Basically, surrealism is if you look at a painting and there's elements of it that look realistic, but maybe the construction is off.
Okay.
It feels dreamlike or unreal.
Okay.
That's
Got
kind
it.
of what surrealist art is. The melting clocks.
Yeah.
The Salvador Dali's elephants with the huge spindly spider legs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In Frida Kahlo's work, she has a painting of a bathtub perspective where she's looking at her feet and there's little boats in the soap.
Okay.
In the bubbles.
Yeah.
Of different symbolism and imagery of her pain and of her loss within the bathtub.
Cool.
And there's part of it where it looks like her toes are kind of melting into the water.
Okay.
So she was combining surrealism and symbolism in her artwork, which made it really that was much more impactful. She also would paint self-portraits of herself with the contraptions that she had to wear on. And she one of her famous paintings is of her where she's split in half, it looks like, and kind of open, and there's these different symbolic representations of how she was feeling coming out of her split self, but it's also being held together by these steel
wow.
medical bars that are on her. So that feeling of she wants to be herself, she wants to do what she wants to do, she wants to live her life, but she's being restrained by her by her chronic illness, by her chronic fatigue and pain. She once wrote that she said, "I paint self-portraits because I paint my own reality. I paint what I need to. Painting completed my life. I lost 3 children and painting substituted for all of this. I am not sick, I am broken, but I am happy to be alive as long as I can paint." So that kept her going.
Yeah.
Was painting. And then she's known for her paintings to this day. And people love her and her story because I think a lot of people relate to her. They relate to the struggle and everything that happened to her. Nothing was her choice. So she dealt with it the best way she could with the tools she had, and that was to paint.
Yeah.
So I love her and her story, and I love her art. I feel even though she didn't develop art therapy, sure, but she just kind of like is an example of how the process of art and the product of art is therapeutic and helps her overcome some unimaginable things in her life.
Yeah.
There's a lot of books about her. You can read up all about her wherever you want, honestly. There's so much about her. Love her story.
That's very inspiring.
If I were to teach an art therapy class, I would teach a lot about her. Like right off the bat, that's the first thing we're going to talk about is Frida Kahlo. Why she's important and what we can get from her art. And her writing, too.
Yeah.
She did some great, like, reflective pieces and, like, kind of poetry and things. And some of the poetry, I think, goes with her paintings, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty cool. So that's where art therapy came from. The next chunk of stuff is a little bit more about what art therapy can look like. Like 99% of the things in therapy, it depends. It depends on the client, depends on their goals, depends on the therapist and the modalities they use, depends on the environment, yada, yada. Art therapy is going to look different depending on what kind of modalities a therapist uses. So an art therapist who is more like in CBT based might do more art therapy that kind of is similar to a worksheet maybe, or is more about like how to reframe thoughts, reframe self-talk, that kind of stuff, versus a art therapist who is more into like Jungian style. That's going to be a lot more like, draw how you're feeling today. And we're going to talk about it and talk about what you drew, what it means. What do the colors mean? So if you're looking for an art therapist, the type of art you're going to do is going to be different depending on what modalities of therapy the therapist uses.
Okay.
It'll kind of change. There are some standard art therapy interventions, like drawing a house or a self-portrait, but even that's going to look a little different depending on the therapist. Also depends on the client themselves and what they are trying to get out of therapy. So I have clients who don't want to do art at all. So we don't. I'm not going to force anyone to do art if they don't want to. I have some clients who are very creative and artistically inclined. And so the type of art intervention I put in front of them is a lot more about like letting go of their artistic ability and like scribbling.
Yeah.
Or tearing up construction paper and turning it into a collage of something else. So less about the technique of drawing and making art and more about experiencing the art making process. So art therapy is going to look different depending on what the client needs, which any therapy is like that.
Right.
And the environment's going to affect what art therapy looks like. Like an inpatient facility, we don't use scissors. If we do, it's very like regimented. Like we pass the scissors come back to the facilitator.
Right.
Like there's a lot more rules, I guess, with the materials in an inpatient facility. And so that kind of determines the access those patients may have to different types of art therapy. Not that they don't get art therapy, it's just going to look different. So it's a lot more paper and pencil or paper and marker based, but it's no less therapeutic. It just is going to be a little bit more material restricted. At a private practice, like where I am, I can use whatever I want pretty much with my clients.
Whatever you have the resources
if
for.
I have the resources, yeah. I can't, well, yeah. There's some things I would love to do that I can't afford. I'd love to have a kiln and do pottery.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be so good for like a parenting group. So good for a parenting group. But that's expensive and I can't do that.
And big.
It takes up a lot of room.
Yeah.
And electricity.
Yeah.
To run a kiln. So I come up with alternative things like air dry clay instead.
Yeah.
And even with the materials, I have to really take into the context of the client and their background, where they're at clinically, what would be most beneficial, like how much they're resistant to doing art. Those are the things that are really going to determine what kind of art I do with a client.
Right.
Like using clay is something I very rarely do because it's not clinically appropriate for all my clients. Paper and marker is pretty much appropriate for everybody because that's stuff they use in school. That's what people grew up using to draw with. And it's also, there's elements of art therapy where I am taking into consideration what emotions the art materials are going to invoke in the client. So like, I haven't had a client with like anger management issues in a long time, but when I did, we did a lot of clay. And we did a lot of kind of modeling clay that doesn't dry out.
Yeah.
That you can reuse. A lot of like manipulating clay and a lot of pushing.
Yeah.
A lot of
very somatic.
pulling, very somatic work with that like anger management type of client would be. Versus if I have a client who's very like anxious and like reserved and doesn't really want to do a whole lot of artwork, I'm just going to give them paper and pencil. We're not going to do clay. That's way too vulnerable. That's way too expressive. But a paper and pencil is controlled. It's familiar. So there's a lot. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I think about the materials I provide like all the time with my clients. That's one of the top things that I'm like making sure, is this going to be appropriate? Is this going to be beneficial? Is this what the client needs?
Yeah.
Versus just like, here's my art cabinet.
Right.
Pick what you want to do, which I do sometimes.
For some people, yeah. I've done that before where I've said like, you have the option of markers, crayons, pens, and paint. And like, depending on what they pick is kind of like where they're at.
Yeah. 100%. Because so if I were to give a client, maybe this would be something I would do like early on, just to gauge where they're at. But I would give them some paper, and I would give them graphite pencil, color pencil, markers, oil pastels, or watercolor paint. And then based on what they pick, those are like different levels of comfort with me, right? Like how much do they trust me? Because from the graphite pencil to the watercolor paint, that range of materials is from like it's very like restricted and rigid to fluid and expressive. So that might be something I would do with a client where I just want to see where they're at emotionally and like how much they trust me with expressing themselves. So that's a good one to do in therapy. And that's something that specifically like, here's a bunch of materials, draw something, is something that like a play therapist would do too.
Right.
It's not just art therapy. It's different when I do it because if I needed to, I can psychoanalyze them. But it's different when I do it because I'm able, like, I know the materials and the client because of my training. So I know what it means, if that makes sense. And then I can ask therapeutic questions that are more art-based because I'm an art therapist, and that's what I do. It's just very interesting. So I just was writing out some of the like, these are the things that people say when they hear I'm an art therapist kind of stuff of like, oh, I can't do art, I'm not creative, that kind of thing. So this is what I say. There is no right or wrong way to make art in art therapy. Art made in art therapy does not need to look pretty. And honestly, it shouldn't be pretty all the time. If I'm telling you to draw what angry looks like, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to look angry, right? That's not what we're here for. The purpose of art in art therapy is to access different parts of the brain that might not be as easily available with traditional talk therapy. So kind of getting into that symbolism stuff.
Yeah. Like,
oh, I noticed you drew a bird on this drawing of feeling happy, but there's not a bird on this drawing of feeling sad. So what do birds mean to you? What does that symbolize to you? Do you see birds in other parts of your life? I love those conversations. There's also the goals and the client's comfort level kind of drive the bus on what we're doing. and when we use art in art therapy. So if a client's not comfortable with doing art, I'm not going to make them do it. If a client says they're comfortable, but is obviously not comfortable with doing art, pen and paper, pencil and paper. If a client is maybe way too excited to do art, way too like, I want to do everything. I want to use glitter and googly eyes and all the stuff. Then I'm going to be like, well, today we're just doing markers and construction paper. But maybe we can do that stuff another time. But like, we're going to do this instead today.
Why would you do that?
Typically with like, I'm imagining this as a younger kid, maybe one of our first days together, our first few sessions together. They want to try all the stuff. So usually what happens, I don't have glitter in my room, but a glitter request is made. Mm-hmm. And so then we open up a bit of conversation about why I don't have glitter and why they want to use glitter. And I guess part of it too is like, I'm like, oh, this kid likes to make a mess. Mm-hmm. So what's an alternative mess making thing? Let's shred up some paper. Let's scribble. That's usually when I use the scribble drawing stuff. If I'm like, this kid wants to just get into the art, we're going to scribble.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. And then sometimes if they want to make a mess and I have the stuff to do it, then I'm like, okay, yeah, but here's the limits.
Right.
We're doing our play therapy limits, right? Our ABCs. And we use that too.
Yeah.
So I'm taking every bit of information about the client into consideration. Their age, their developmental stage. Is it appropriate for them to use scissors? Does it seem like they can control the glitter if they want to use it?
Yeah.
How do we have a
sensory seeking?
Right.
They're gonna put the paint all over their hands.
Right. Like, are we okay with getting paint on our hands? Are we not okay? So it's a lot of stuff. And it's mostly just me trying to figure out, okay, what does this client need? And how are they going to get it by playing with glitter and googly eyes? Mm-hmm. What are we doing here? And with young kids, I usually don't give directives to young kids about what art to make, but I pick the art materials. Yeah. Mostly. My hatred for glitter is because it gets everywhere, and sensory wise, I don't like it. And I don't want to touch it.
The only reason I don't have glitter is because I respect the other people who share my office.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't care if my room's covered in glitter.
I think it's pretty. I don't want to touch it or clean it up. And I'm the same way for slime. Kids love slime, but I don't want to clean it up. I don't want to touch it. So we don't do it. Mm-hmm. And some people are like, oh, you should let the kids do what they want. But
there's limits for a reason. Like,
right.
You should let the kids do what they want, but if they're going to tear my curtains down and set stuff on fire, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Like, I take that restriction of I don't have glitter and I don't do slime as a opportunity for limit setting. And like, you're disappointed that I don't do slime in my room. Yeah. What should we do instead? Like, problem solving. Right. Let's see. Can you problem solve? Mm-hmm. Do you melt down? It's very like I have restrictions on art materials for a reason. It's not always because I don't like it, but I have those restrictions for a reason. Yeah. And it opens up opportunities for some kind of therapeutic process to happen.
Everything's purposeful in therapy.
Yeah, 100%. I have giant glue sticks, and it makes my teenagers mad because they want to glue like perfect little like small pieces of paper on their teeny tiny collage. Mm-hmm. But I have those giant glue sticks because I'm like, I kind of want to see them get mad, and I kind of want to see what they do. Like, how are they going to creatively get out of this situation and deal with it? And same thing with my scissors. I have little baby scissors, but I also have safety scissors that are bigger, but they're not very sharp because they're safety scissors. And it's the same thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not really cutting that thick cardboard that you've got there really well. What are we gonna do about it? Mm-hmm. What can we do instead? What would work better? Just having those conversations too. So it's all intentional. I do everything on purpose, which was the last thing, was just the materials are picked intentionally.
Yeah.
And provided intentionally. Because sometimes, so I always have pencils, paper, and markers out. They're just like out where kids can see them. But most of my other art supplies are behind a door, behind a cabinet door. Mm-hmm. And I will bring stuff out as needed per client. But papers, pencil, and markers are something that kids have access to at school and at home. It's a very common, they know and understand the rules of how to use those materials.
Yeah.
That is not something that I have to really monitor a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So they're available to everybody. 5-year-old knows how to color with a crayon.
Yeah.
They're there. But my collage materials, my stickers, the glue, the wet glue, my scissors too are put up. I don't have those out either. And that's on purpose. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's my long spiel about art therapy for today.
Cool. Okay, I have questions that I feel like people might wonder.
Okay.
So you said that there's all different types of art therapists that have different methods and different styles. Mm-hmm. So what would you recommend if someone is specifically looking for an art therapist? What kinds of things should they ask before making an appointment or in their first session? Is it important that they find someone who has a specific style based on whatever they want to work on, or should they be open to the therapist's style, or what kind of questions should they ask?
Yeah. So this is going to make everyone mad, but it depends. So it's really going to depend. It's going to depend on what the client wants out of therapy. Why are they seeking art therapy specifically? Mm-hmm. Right? Most of the time, I would say about half of my clients I have gotten on my caseload because they're kids. Mm-hmm. And because art therapy is very similar to play therapy. And a lot of the kids that come my way are creative already. So their parents are like, oh, they already like art making. Therefore, talking to an art therapist is going to be easier, which is true. Mm-hmm. It is going to be a little easier. But every now and then I get a client sent my way where they didn't know I was an art therapist. They just knew I was a therapist. So it looks a little different if we do actually do art therapy. We don't always do art therapy. But if someone's looking for an art therapist, and this is kind of, I guess, some advice in general for looking for a therapist, period. But thinking about what do you want to get out of therapy? Mm-hmm. What is your goal with therapy, or goals? What are your goals with therapy? Are you just wanting a place to openly vent and just like express your emotions and be validated? In that case, art therapy could be beneficial if you have a hard time talking about your feelings, but you feel the need to get them out, then art therapy would be good for that. If you're wanting to dive more into like some childhood stuff, art therapy would be good for that, but paired with a therapist who uses more like trauma focused work in their art therapy.
Yeah.
Because art therapy for a kid is going to look a lot different than art therapy for someone who's middle-aged and has gone through childhood trauma, mm-hmm. and is wanting to process it now. So in looking for an art therapist, I think people should think about why they're looking for an art therapist specifically, because then that'll help determine what they're looking for in an art therapist.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like across the board, like looking for a therapist, what you should do.
Sure. I would imagine adults who are looking for art therapy are either artists themselves, so they want mm-hmm. to do art in therapy because it's already something they enjoy doing, mm-hmm. or they have trouble expressing themselves with words, and so they feel like they need a different way to communicate.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the adults that I have seen, they've already done talk therapy. So they're trying art therapy to see if they can get something different out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually because either the talk therapy wasn't enough, or maybe like the talk therapy helped at the time, but they need something different to work on a different goal. But pretty frequently, the adults that I have seen, they've already seen a talk therapist before, or like a marriage counselor before. So art therapy is new, and they're hoping that that newness will maybe push them closer to whatever goals they're working on.
Yeah. Okay. My next question is, how are your art therapy sessions structured? Do you do something different every time? Is there ever like, oh, I didn't have time to finish this, so I'm going to finish it next time? I feel like that would be a worry that I would have as a therapist, is like, what if you don't finish what you started in your session? You only have like 55 minutes to.
Right.
Yeah.
It depends. But it like, so in that case specifically where you're worried that the like art process is going to take longer than one session, if you're already worried about that, telling the client ahead of time, like, hey, we're going to do this art project or artwork together or in session today, and it might be something that we also continue next session if we don't get it done today. So already setting them up for that expectation of you don't have to get it done today.
Yeah.
When it comes to kids, that's really hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have an opportunity to practice some coping skills for disappointment and that they didn't finish their project or whatever. But typically, my art therapy sessions, again, it depends. But typically, if I have a art therapy intervention, an expressive art intervention that I want to use with a client because I think it would be beneficial for them, the first thing I do when they first come in the room is try to gauge if they are there for the day or not. Are they even going to be, do they feel able to do that intervention or not? And that'll depend on what the intervention is about, is how like directive it is, how many steps there are, or if there's no steps. So if a client comes in and they're really anxious about a test coming up at school, that's probably not a good day for me to introduce this intervention to them.
Mm-hmm.
The intervention might be something to do after they finish their test. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
I hated hearing that in grad school, and then I say it all the time now.
Right.
But for the most part, my sessions in the beginning, I gauge if they're mentally available to do the intervention or not. I give them the opportunity to turn it down. So I'll say, I have I usually call it art project with the kids that I work with. And then with the adults and the young adults, I say intervention. But I'll say, I've got this art intervention that I think would be really helpful for you. Do you want to do that, or do you want to do something else today? With kids, it's 50-50. With young adults, usually they're like, okay. And then adults want to know every detail about what we're going to do before we do it. And it drives them insane because I'm like,
you haven't done it yet, so
like,
I don't know. Like,
I need a yes or no first from you.
Yeah.
It sounds like maybe it's a no today. And then we have a whole conversation about it. Like, hey, I guess you're not feeling ready for doing artwork today. What's going on that you haven't told me yet? Because you came in here on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm feeling like maybe you're not ready. What's that about? Let's talk about it. That happens a lot. Because I think like most adults have not drawn or done art since they were kids.
Yeah.
So it's very intimidating to be doing art in a very vulnerable space like therapy.
And I think people don't realize, or they forget how vulnerable it is to create the art. You remember doing arts and crafts in childhood, but that's pretty directive.
Yeah. And it's very directive. It's like you do these steps and like, yay, you've drawn a puppy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm over here telling you, here's a packet of markers and paper. Draw whatever you want.
Mhm.
And they're like, whatever I want? I don't know what the fuck I want to draw. Someone said that to me one time, and I was like,
I get that a lot.
Draw
like,
that.
If I'm doing anything non-directive, they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, well, I'll be here.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah. And sometimes, so a very frequent art intervention that I do with clients across the age range is to draw their family and to draw a house.
Mm-hmm.
That's like an art therapy assessment. I don't follow the assessment to the T, like to write up a report for a diagnostic thing. I use some of those like elements of the assessment scaling stuff, but I'm using it more to kind of like gauge what's going on subconsciously a little bit. But drawing their family and drawing a house. So sometimes telling them, hey, draw your family where everyone's doing something. Kids, no problem. Teenagers have questions.
Mhm.
Adults have a lot of questions and usually are upset the whole time they're drawing. Not like crying, but they're like,
They just want to be told what to do.
yeah. They're like, what do you mean draw everyone doing something? I'm like, that's all I'm giving you, bud.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I have interventions that are much more step directive. I have a thing that I like to do with like preteens and teens that's about taking a negative self-talk statement and turning it into an affirmation. And it involves some writing, but it also involves like symbolism and drawing and making a creative expression of the positive affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very follow these steps and I will guide you through it. I'll hold your hand. We're going to do it together. I have examples if you need help. Like that kind of intervention is way more like which is great for people who are really anxious about doing art because I'm like, here's an example and here's how we do it. And then drawing your family where everyone's doing something is the scariest thing that I could ask you to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the art interventions across the board are going to have various levels of how many steps. Is it directive? Do I just tell you to draw how you're feeling today? And then I'm watching how you react to that. I'm watching what you say. I'm watching how long it takes you to start. That's pretty significant with as the ages go up, how long it takes for the person to just start the drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, you're delaying and avoiding this drawing. And you can keep drawing or we can talk about why you're avoiding it.
Right. Yeah. Or I've had some people when we're doing drawing stuff, they're just like, they draw it so fast and then they're like, okay, I'm done.
Which is fine, but I'm going to take note of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that also feels like a little bit of avoidance to me.
Yeah.
If I tell you to draw, well, when I tell people to draw their family, I tell them no stick people.
Okay.
But any other time they draw people, they can draw stick people. But specifically with family, I don't want them to draw stick people. And that's part of the assessment, but I say that so that they take longer to draw.
Okay.
So that they're thinking about it a little more as they draw.
Mm-hmm.
But I just do that on purpose so they put more intention into their drawing.
Yeah.
And they don't just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My last question is it common, encouraged, not encouraged for people to do art on their own and then bring it to therapy to process?
If someone makes art at home and wants to show me it to talk about it, that is fine. But it is not expected.
It's not homework that you give them.
It's not homework.
Yeah.
I very rarely give art as a homework. If I do, it's usually just do more art at home, please.
Yeah.
Or like there are some mindful doodles that I will teach in session, and then I give them like a little notebook, and I'm like, hey, I want you to fill a couple pages with some mindful doodlings. And you don't have to bring it back, but like just do some of these at night before bed or when you get home from school.
But you don't typically give art prompts like journal prompts for
No,
homework.
no.
Yeah.
I do a lot of journal prompts with clients, and that is homework. and I usually will write it on a piece of paper and give it to them, or if it's like 18 and up, I'll text them the prompt, and then or I'll email the parents and be like, hey, I gave them a journaling prompt to try. And I also, when I do give them journaling prompt homework, I also tell them, I'm like, hey, if you don't get this done before you see me next time, that's okay. This is not a grade. I have a lot of high achieving kiddos. So I have to be like, it's not a grade.
Yeah, you almost have to not call it homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually am like, here's something to try at home if you feel like it. Mm-hmm. But when adults, I'll tell them, like, here's a homework thing to try. But my high achieving kiddos, I'm like, here's something you can do at home if you feel like it. But also it's not a grade.
So, but then sometimes you'll have people who just on their own will create something at home and then want to talk to you about it.
Yeah. I've had some kids where they know I'm an art therapist, and so they bring in like their sketchbooks and stuff. I've had some teenagers do that too, where they bring in a sketchbook to show me. And I think it's almost like they want me to psychoanalyze their drawings with them, but I do not at all. Mm-hmm. If it's an art that they have, I say that in my sessions, if it's an artwork that they've made outside of the therapy room and they bring it in, I'm going to talk about it like they brought their stuffy to a session, or they brought a toy to show me in session. The thing they brought in is not art therapy. We're going to talk about it more general, and I'll be like, I mean, I'll ask them questions about it. I'm like, oh, where'd you come up with this idea? This is really interesting. Or, oh, that looks like a character from the manga you were telling me about. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to ask them therapeutic processing questions because they did not make that art in art therapy with me.
Okay, interesting.
And I think other people might be different about that, but that's how I feel, I guess. Because them making art and bringing it to show me, for the most part, is just them being like, you're an art appreciator. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing I made.
Okay. So that's interesting because I'm not an art therapist. And I feel like for the most part, the only time people, especially kids, bring me something, like show me their sketchbook, is like to say like, this is how I'm feeling. Do you get it?
Yes.
Like,
which has happened to me several times before, where a kid is like, I drew how I felt at school on Monday and I brought it to show you. Mm-hmm. That is them using the art process therapeutically for themselves. Yeah. And we can talk about it.
Okay.
But we're going to talk more about like why they drew it and when they drew it. We're going to talk about the things around it and not so much about the drawing.
Right.
Unless it's relevant.
That's how I've done it too. Yeah. But I feel like most of the time when people have brought me their art as a non-art specific therapist, it's like a cry for help. Like,
yeah.
Like, look at this bloody thing I drew. I'm like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all, yeah. That's another thing too, is that like I've had like experiences where with younger clients and their parents are concerned about what they're drawing. And so then I asked the kid to either the parents bring it and show me, or I asked the kid, I was like, hey, can you draw that drawing again for me so I can just like see what you're drawing? And I will say, so far in my professional experience, none of them have been red flag alarm bells. What's typically going on is that they're drawing stuff from like video games or YouTube or something that they've seen that is like maybe a little disturbing for them, right? They're seeing maybe like a violent video game that they're too young for. They're not age appropriate. And it's not that they're drawing this like bloody battle scene because they want to kill their little sister. Mm-hmm. They're drawing it because they're trying to process this disturbing image that they're seeing that is constantly popping up in their head now.
Right.
They're trying to process it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I would probably introduce, instead of an art therapy intervention, a play therapy, like CCPT. Let's play out the drawing you just made. Mm-hmm. And that's usually when I can tell if it's like a Roblox game or a video game or something from YouTube. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. And sometimes it's because I'm like, oh, I play that video game. I know what that is.
Right.
Or that's from a superhero movie you probably shouldn't be watching.
So many kids these days, they love horror things. So it's
okay.
Couldn't be me. But.
Right. Yeah. And like, I kind of like horror and creepy things. And so I get the fascination. And I think it's really funny when it's like a 12-year-old or like a preteen or maybe a teenager even, and they're drawing creepy stuff all the time. And I'm like, you're just doing this because you know your mom doesn't like it.
Yep.
You know, if you draw that on your stuff, that she'll leave it alone.
Either that or she'll give you attention and be like,
Yeah,
are you okay?
that
And
too.
then you're like, yeah, you're talking to me. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, or like a preteen will get really into like a horror movie and be drawing scenes from it. And it's for attention.
Mhm.
It's 100% for attention.
Well, connection. I like
Connection.
I'm trying to
Connection.
rewire my brain to replace attention with connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seeking some kind of connection. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good point. But it's so funny because like sometimes very often they'll draw scenes from whatever horror movie and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I've seen that one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't know if you're trying to creep me out, but nice try.
Oh, yeah. I've had so many kids who are like, look at this thing. I'm like, cool.
Yeah. I just act very like, whatever.
Right.
Like, okay. I don't see it as an issue. It is just
Yeah, and I think
seeking
that's kind of what
connection.
they want. They want somebody to be like, that's normal. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into. Like, somebody made it.
Right.
Like-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Not everybody who makes horror movies are suicidal psychopaths. Like,
yeah. And just because someone is drawing that kind of stuff all the time doesn't mean that they are, a suicidal or person or a psychopath or they're on a homicidal rampage. Like,
yeah.
no, it's just kind of a fascination for something that's a little creepy, a little dark, a little counterculture-y, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like counterculture, but it's pretty popular. Like, horror is like really popular.
I made that point to one of my clients recently. And this is a client I've been seeing for a very long time. Since I started. And and I made that like point. I was like, oh, I've seen that before. I was like, that's kind of popular, isn't it? And I just saw them go like,
Oh no.
and I was like, oh, whoops. I tore down their punk aesthetic a little bit.
Whoops.
But we've got banter going, and it was
Mhm.
just like a point where I was like, oh, whoops, we weren't ready for that.
Yep.
Let's repair real quick.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all I've got. I had a couple of Reddit things that I had found, but it was mostly just people explaining their appreciation for art therapy and how it's helped them express themselves and process things in ways that they wouldn't have thought to do. Talking about the difference between therapeutic art on your own and art therapy, which we've talked about before. I don't think that episode's been released, but it will.
We'll do it.
But for the most part, yeah, that's what I wanted to know about art therapy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What should the audience tell us today?
Either if you haven't done art therapy, maybe a question you have about it. And if you have done art therapy, was it helpful? And did you like it? Not
Mhm.
everyone likes art therapy.
Yeah, that's what I would like to know too. Like, what questions do you have about art therapy that Jess can answer in a future episode?
Yeah.
And I don't know why I said and. There's nothing else. That's the end of the sentence.
Either a question about art therapy or a little bit about your experience if you've done art therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Or a general compliment for us.
Oh, yeah. Something nice.
Thank you so much for sharing about your passion.
Yes.
And I'm glad we could help you study.
Yeah, that did help me study.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, please make sure you are subscribing and commenting and sharing with your friends, rate, review, all the things wherever you are watching or listening to us. We appreciate any kind of engagement that we can get. Let us know if there's any topics that you want to hear about in the future. I think next week I'm going to talk about how to start therapy.
Ooh, okay.
And find a therapist. And so make sure you're here for that. Anything else?
No. I
All
talk way too much.
No. These episodes have been longer this season.
That is
But-
true. And podcasts are literally for talking, so.
Yeah. The people who like long things will watch.
Yeah.
And if you don't, follow us on social media and you can get the bite-sized version.
I'll be doing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a great week and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Goodbye.